All right, Friday morning Krug Show. Chase Senior's in the house. We're talking 49ers. A lot to get to. The offseason is upon us. Let's go right now. All right, welcome to the Krug Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue there is. Also, Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles are at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove. Call my friend Anthony Catania at 831-521-5264. And as you can see by looking at the bottom of the screen, this live stream is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. We'll try that later this hour. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get that first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does automatically is entered into a drawing to win a free signed Ricky Pearsall jersey, and we'll award the winner on Super Bowl Sunday. All right, we are off and running. Chase Senior's in the house. There is the jersey, the autographed Pearsall jersey. We have it here. Super Bowl Sunday. It could be yours. All you got to do is sign up at Better. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get that first deposit matched. And everybody who does automatically is in a drawing to win that jersey. So thanks to Better for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. Chase Senior's in the house. Always a fun stream on a Friday. And Dan Graziano, Chase, of ESPN, says that Robert Saleh is the favorite in his mind from the people that he's talking to, his sources, that Robert Saleh is the favorite to be the 49ers' next defensive coordinator. Do you think that's going to be a reality, or what stands in between Saleh to the Niners?
I think what stands in between it happening is whether or not he gets a head coaching job. He's going to interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars on Tuesday. Then he's going to interview with the Las Vegas Raiders after that. And those are two organizations that are very interesting from a head coaching search standpoint because they are looking for a new culture builder. For Jacksonville, they're moving off of Doug Peterson, and Robert Saleh has familiarity with that organization because he was a linebackers coach there under Gus Bradley, who he followed. And Gus Bradley, of course, is the originator kind of the Legion of Boom. And the Niners run a lot of elements of that defense. And they've run that scheme for years under Kyle Shanahan. And then Saleh went from there to the Niners, where he was the defensive coordinator under Shanahan from 2017 through 2020. And then he's going to interview with the Las Vegas Raiders, who fired Antonio Pierce. Then they fired general manager Tom Telesco when that wasn't expected to happen. And I think that Tom Brady has had a lot to say alongside Mark Davis in rebuilding that organization, just tearing it down to the studs and saying, look, let's start this new regime. Let's start over. Let's get a new head coach. Let's get a new general manager. And I think there are plenty of reasons why Saleh is getting these head coaching jobs. I think people realize that with the New York Jets, he wasn't really dealt a great or fair shake or hand. He had some of the top performing defenses while he was there throughout his tenure. They could just never get the quarterback position right. And Woody Johnson is one of the worst owners in the sport. Now, if I'm Saleh, I'm not sure if I want to go to Jacksonville because I just went from one rocky ship potentially to another. And I don't know if I want to work alongside Trent Baalke, but the Raiders are interesting. And I don't think they go defense here. I do think ultimately they go offense, but now you get to work maybe with Tom Brady, and you get to have some personnel say. You can rebuild that defense led by Max Crosby, who's one of the top players in the NFL. And so that's what would stand between him becoming the defensive coordinator for the Niners is if he gets a head coaching job. I've been saying for months, even during the season, right after Saleh got fired by the Jets, he is my number one defensive coordinator candidate because I think that the scheme still works with a good DC. I think that he has the ability to develop and maximize players. I think the Niners need a little bit of juice, energy, and leadership on that sideline because Kyle Shanahan really isn't that rah-rah guy, but we saw this team respond well to it with DeMeco Ryans and Robert Saleh. I think that familiarity would get some of the players excited, and I think that he could help turn around this Niners defense, which has gone downhill since DeMeco Ryans left a couple of years ago. And so he could be the head coach of the defense. Kyle Shanahan can be the head coach of the offense. And I kind of like that organizational structure, to be honest.
Yeah. And, Saleh in a lot of ways is perfect because, Shanahan didn't say it, but we know that he likes Chris Kasarik. He likes their wide nine.
Yep.
He doesn't. Does he want a new defensive coordinator? Yeah. He thinks there's better guys out there, but I don't think they want to go and switch their entire scheme. Now, he was asked about switching the scheme, and he's like, well, I thought he said one thing when I first heard it because I was sitting there. I thought he had said, like, hey, I'm open to moving the scheme and this and that. And he kind of did. But when I heard it again, it was more like, hey, look, when other teams do things to us, in other words, like the Niners got 4 of the last 6 games they played, they got 0 sacks.
Yeah.
And when you're not getting home, you have to be able to dial up some exotic blitzes. You got to be able to dial up some pressures.
Yep.
And I just felt like Sorensen was incapable of doing it, uncomfortable doing it.
Yeah.
I heard people suggest that maybe he's not good at it because they don't do it a lot. But to me, it was like a statement from Shanahan that not necessarily that he wants to switch the scheme, but that he wants a coordinator that has more tricks in his bag. If you stonewall, our 4-man rush, where do we go from there? I'm sharing the screen on this one because this is Harrison Glazer covers the Jets. He put this out this week. Robert Saleh, before and after he was fired, the Jets were first in yards per play, second in yards per pass attempt, second in opponent yards per game, and fifth in opponents' points per game before Saleh went down. And then after, those numbers fell from first to 10th, second to 26th, second to 15th, and fifth to 28th under Jeff Ulbrich. When you see these numbers, do you say, man, Ulbrich's not the guy, or is it, or do you look at the positive and say, yeah, Saleh most definitely is the guy?
Let me add some numbers on top of that too, because from the time that Saleh got hired up until he got fired, the Jets were first in points per drive, first in EPA per play, and third in success rate. And so going back to your Jeff Ulbrich question, a lot of people are advocates for the Niners hiring him if he's not retained by the Jets and he got a head coaching interview. But the Jets were a disaster, even more of a disaster with Ulbrich as compared to Saleh, who frankly, I thought he did a really good job. And they did a good job of compiling talent. He did a good job of maximizing players. A player like Bryce Huff had a career year last year. He had 10 sacks. He signs with Philadelphia and he gets $34 million in guaranteed money. He did nothing this year. And so I think Saleh was able to bring the best out of players. And I think that the dip and downslide in numbers from when Saleh was there to when he got fired, obviously Ulbrich was the interim head coach and he couldn't be the defensive coordinator that he was prior, and that could impact some of the defensive numbers. But I think the biggest storyline with that, Larry, is I think Saleh had a huge say in the defensive game plan. And his say in the defensive game plan went a long way in the Jets defense being one of the top performing units in the entire National Football League when he was the head coach. And then he gets fired. He's not a part of the game plan any longer. And I imagine he's also play calling, situationally, game management wise. He has his fingerprints on that. And we saw a Jets defense that went from being elite statistically to looking dysfunctional, to having all of these lapses, to being statistically and eye test wise one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And so there are a lot of people out there who are saying the Niners have to change defensive schemes. The wide 9 doesn't work any longer. Well, hold on. Jim Schwartz runs a wide 9. Vic Fangio at times runs a wide 9 front here and there. Robert Saleh was running the same defensive system. It was working. DeMeco Ryans, the last 2 years as the head coach of the Houston Texans, was running the same system, and those Texans defenses have been really good, especially their front, with creating and generating pressure on the opposing quarterback. And so I think the system can still work. Robert Saleh knows it very well. I think that Saleh would be more creative and more exotic as far as finding ways to generate pressure on the quarterback. This team would be fundamentally better off They'd be better coached. They could survive better against the run. He could put players in a position to succeed. He would do a better job of maximizing and developing players, which is the sign of a good coach. And for all of those reasons, that's why I would like to bring Saleh back. I don't think San Francisco has to change defensive schemes. Do they need to get better personnel-wise at defensive end, at defensive tackle, and at linebacker? There is no doubt about it. But I think that the best coaches in the NFL are able to extract the most talent out of individuals and a team defensive unit. Look no further than a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who this year have the #1 overall defense in the NFL. Last year, they had arguably the worst defense in the NFL. Couple of personnel changes and players making leaps helped to make that happen. But Vic Fangio also coached his ass off. And so you bring in a better coach in Robert Saleh, you become better as a defense. You address defensive tackle, you address edge. Let's say you bring back Dre Greenlaw. You have a really good blossoming young secondary. I think this Niners defense can get back on track if they knock those things out of the park this offseason. And they're off to a good start by firing Nick Sorensen. It had to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that the Sorensen thing wasn't working. Is Robert Saleh a good coach? You know, he wasn't good in New York, that's for sure. I mean, he wasn't good as a head coach in New York. His defense played pretty well, but is he a good? I mean, how would you describe the job that he did in New York? Because I mean, clearly they didn't get it done. I don't know how much of you want to put on him as opposed to, others. But how much does Saleh have to answer for the fact that, man, he just didn't get it done as a head coach in New York?
Win-loss wise, he didn't get it done. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Are you winning games? Are you making it to the playoffs? Are you making runs at Super Bowls? Are you winning division titles? Are you winning consistently? Obviously, that is the job of a head coach. But look, with Robert Saleh, the Jets knew that when they hired him, his specialty, his side of the ball, was defense. The defense was not the issue throughout his entire New York tenure. The problem was they never got quarterback right. And that was the issue at the start of his regime. Then they go out, they make the splash move for Aaron Rodgers. 4 plays into last year, he tears his Achilles. And then it was a free fall offensively after that. But I will say this. They were still a pretty competitive team going into November, December, even with all of that bad quarterback play. And so even if last year they just had average quarterback play, they were a borderline playoff team. But prior to Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson was awful. They never got OC right. That could be on Robert Saleh. They never got quarterback right, and the offense was always bad. But the defense, which was his specialty, was a high-performing unit. And you're not worried about, if he comes to San Francisco, how he would fare as a head coach. You want him to be the head coach of the defense. And what he did with the Niners, what he did on defense with the Jets, I think was an impressive body of work.
There was a report yesterday that the Niners interviewed Deshae Townsend for their defensive coordinator position. He's a former Alabama defensive back who played with the Steelers. He's won a Super Bowl in his career. He had a really good NFL career and is now a coach.
Yeah.
And they also interviewed Robert Saleh, and both of those interviews were done virtually. And the interviews mean that the Niners have satisfied the Rooney Rule, which requires teams to interview at least 2 minority candidates, diverse candidates, either minorities or women. And candidates who don't currently work for the team. So they've satisfied that with the Townsend and the Saleh interviews. That being said, are there any other candidates that outside of Saleh, if it wasn't Saleh, or let's just say Saleh were to get a Raiders job or a Jacksonville job? I don't think he's going to get either, to be honest. But let's just say he's not, because I think it's pretty clear he's their first choice.
Yeah.
If they don't get their first choice, who do you think they pivot to?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Deshae Townsend, and I do want to spend a couple of moments talking about him because I think that's an interesting candidate. And it's so funny, when I threw that name out there, I did a video on it and I talked about it on my social media pages. People are like, isn't the Lions defense awful? Isn't that Lions secondary one of the worst in the NFL? Come on, you can't be such a casual like that. You have to understand that the Lions have suffered injury after injury after injury on the defensive side of the football. We're talking defensive line, linebackers, cornerbacks, safeties. They have suffered a historic amount of injuries on that side of the ball, yet they've still been a unit that's been able to produce. They've still been one of the top secondaries in the NFL. I thought it was pretty notable how Kyle Shanahan said during Lions week or after Lions week, they've had so many injuries, but that's still one of the top secondaries in the NFL. Did you see what they did with a depleted defense with a handful of players on IR against the Minnesota Vikings? Sam Darnold had been playing great. Kevin O'Connell's one of the top play callers in the NFL. They have a great 1-2 punch at wide receiver with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Aaron Jones is a really good running back, and the Vikings could not find the end zone. And Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, was calling the plays, but Deshae Townsend was leading the secondary. He's the pass game defensive coordinator and the DB's coach, and they've played really good ball at corner and at safety. And that Aaron Glenn system is gaining some popularity because of what he's been able to do. And there are going to be teams jockeying to hire him to be a head coach. And so he comes from that system, and he's been in the NFL for so long coaching up DBs. He has a really impressive resume. I don't think he's going to be the guy, but there's a reason why Kyle Shanahan noticed what he's been doing, what the Lions have been doing, and he interviewed him. And I think part of these interviews are trying to gather intel for what other teams do on the defensive side of the ball to get some of that information. As for some other defensive coordinator candidates, you're looking at a guy like Jeff Ulbrich or Dennis Allen, Matt Eberflus. I don't think Jim Schwartz is going to get let go by Cleveland because it looks as though Kevin Stefanski is safe. But there are those Gus Bradley is kind of a classic, like, Legion of Boom guy who was with Seattle under Pete Carroll, went to Jacksonville, took Saleh with them. Those Colts defensive numbers were atrocious. But if the Niners want scheme continuity and they want to run it back with the same system, Gus Bradley runs that system, and now he's free. And so, like, those names right there are the names that are probably the most attractive defensive coordinator candidates who the Niners can choose from. But I think Robert Saleh is, like, far and away the best candidate among those guys.
A lot of people speculated that maybe Saleh and Shanahan didn't get along great because Saleh went to coach for Green Bay, but I don't know. I don't necessarily read that as that, and I don't think there's anything there. I do think that Saleh would be popular with the players and with the fans, which is good. The Niners also today had the All-Pros were announced, and Fred Warner was their lone All-Pro. George Kittle was a second-team All-Pro. Juszczyk was a second-team All-Pro. What did you think of the list? I mean, to me, this one is so – I don't want to say it's frustrating because I don't care that much. But I just find the Juszczyk thing to be kind of comical at this point. It's like, so the 49ers are one of, like, a very few teams, like a handful, like maybe 3 or 4 that use a fullback in the NFL. Right. And they have a Pro Bowl fullback, and they have the second team All-Pro fullback. And yet, Chase, they can't run inside the 5-yard line.
No.
And they can't run in short yardage. They can't run on the goal line. They're not good at punching it in. There was 3 weeks ago, they had second and goal from the 4. They went pass, field goal. It bothers me that they have this Pro Bowl fullback and yet they can't run. What's the purpose of having a Pro Bowl fullback? I kind of feel like the Niners ought to copy the Eagles and the Ravens to a degree, Ole Miss, and just don't use Juszczyk anymore. Cut him loose. Use a guy like Garendo for some of the speed elements of the fullback position, and go find a lineman. Go find a defensive lineman that moves people. Go sign Milton Williams away from the Eagles and let him be your short yardage fullback. I mean, be more creative, because you have a fullback, but you can't move anybody in the run game. Yeah. What's the purpose of having a fullback that you pay significant dollars to if you can't run inside the 5?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this since last year. I don't think it makes any sense in today's NFL, especially given modern day NFL offensive concepts, to pay a fullback as much as the Niners have paid and are paying Kyle Juszczyk, because he only plays fullback. And I get it. He's a special fullback. He's one of the best fullbacks in the history of football. He's very gifted with his ability to be a lead blocker, run the football from time to time, although it's few and far between with those opportunities to catch the ball out of the backfield, to line up out of the slot. Anytime he's thrown the football, he makes a play. And in some big games last year in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, he made some spectacular catches. But at the same time, people are going to brag how Kyle Juszczyk has the most Pro Bowls among all fullbacks in NFL history. They're going to say, well, he's a multi-time All-Pro player. Yeah, well, it's kind of along the same lines of, I'm not taking anything away from Wilt Chamberlain did back in the day, but you and I were guarding him, right? And if you and I are guarding Wilt Chamberlain, of course he's going to put up stupid numbers. There are very few fullbacks in the NFL, and so the pot to choose from for Pro Bowl and All-Pro honors is very thin. So I never really think it's a smart team building strategy to devote a lot of financial capital to the fullback position. Part of the reason why the Niners also struggle to run it is they have a weak link at center. They were awful at left guard. I can't believe Chris Forrester defended Aaron Banks the way that he did. And Colton McKivitz, some people are going to say, analytically, he did pretty good. But what do my eyes tell me? My eyes tell me that he's one of the worst right tackles in the NFL. And so the Niners struggle offensive line-wise to run block. Kyle Juszczyk probably doesn't benefit from a bad offensive line in front of him. You're giving all this money to a fullback when you don't need to. What's the alternative? Like the Eagles, for instance, they turned Ben Van Sumeren, who is a special teams linebacker, into a fullback. And
great athlete.
He's able to serve multiple purposes. He can be a backup off-ball linebacker. He can be a special teamer, and he can be a fullback. He got hurt. What did the Eagles do? They took CJ Uzama, who's been a longtime veteran NFL tight end, who's always been a really good blocker, and now they have him as a fullback. They signed Kari Blasingame to the practice squad. They've elevated him to the active roster a couple of times. He's not keeping and holding on to an open roster spot on the 53. And so there is roster manipulation, roster gymnastics that you can do in order to implement a fullback if you want. What I think the Niners should do, and I said this after last year, saying they needed to make some changes financially, get rid of Juszczyk. You don't need to pay him that much. They cut his salary, okay, but he's now taken up a roster spot. He's taken up cash. Draft a fullback if you want, or draft a linebacker or a tight end who can also play fullback. You're paying that player nothing. Maybe turn Isaac Guerendo into that fullback type of guy who you can use in motion as a lead blocker and get creative with building your roster. Unfortunately, though, we know that Kyle Shanahan, with his guys, is loyal to a fault.
I've got an idea. Free agent signing Tommy Tremble away from Carolina. Tommy Tremble is kind of a shorter tight end.
Yeah.
Play him as a fullback. Use Tommy Tremble as a backup tight end and a fullback.
Yeah.
And there you go. And then use Guerendo. I mean, people are laughing because I've been saying use Guerendo, but Guerendo's not a running back. Come on. It's so obvious. He's fast, but he has no instincts. Let him play fullback. He'd be a very, very dangerous fullback. As far as, these are all difficult decisions. One of the guys I saw on the free agent list is Mekhi Becton. How do Eagles fans and yourself and Eagles media, how do they feel about Mekhi Becton and the job that he did this year in Philly?
Yeah, and let me just add something to what you just said. Like Cam Skattebo out of Arizona
ASU?
State, he would be an awesome running back and fullback. This is also part of the reason why I wanted the Niners to look at a player like Ben Sinnott, the Kansas State tight end who the Commanders drafted to
really
be that
player.
tight end, H-back type of fullback player. So these are the ideas that I've been talking about, how you can draft that player to serve a different purpose or sign that player to serve a different purpose, and they can have a multifaceted impact instead of Kyle Juszczyk just solely being a fullback and serving one purpose. As far as Mekhi Becton goes, this is a classic Howie Roseman move. And Howie Roseman, I think, should be the executive of the year. He signed Saquon Barkley away from the New York Giants, 2 years, $26 million in guaranteed money, $13 million per year. And for him to get paid $13 million this year, to run for more than 2,000 yards and be the NFL Offensive Player of the Year, that's a steal. They signed Zach Bond for the vet min. He had never played off-ball linebacker before. He is a first-team All-Pro at off-ball linebacker alongside Fred Warner. Incredible player developmental story. A player like Mekhi Becton.
Where did Bond play? Safety?
What's that?
Where did Zach Bond play?
He was an edge rusher. He was an outside linebacker. And Vic Fangio and Howie identified him as a player who could play off ball. And he's been incredible for the number one defense in the NFL. Yeah. And they got him for chump change, right? And then going to Mekhi Becton, he's drafted out of Louisville, massive size. First year with the Jets at offensive tackle, played pretty well. And then the offense stunk. The coaching on offense stunk. He started to suffer injuries. He started to struggle. There was a lack of mental confidence there. But then the Eagles are like, all right, we need some offensive line depth. Let's sign Mekhi Becton. At the very least, he can be a backup swing tackle, but let's try him at guard. And Tyler Steen, a former third-round pick who was an offensive tackle for Alabama and Vanderbilt in his career, they drafted him to be a guard. He gets hurt. They put Becton at right guard, never looks back. And he turned into one of the best signings of the offseason and one of the top interior offensive linemen in the game. And he ended up being a really, really good player for the number 2 rushing attack in the NFL, paving open running lanes for Saquon Barkley, who led the league in rushing yards with 2,005 yards this year. And so that's a player who is a road grader, good against the pass, who I think would be a good signing for San Francisco. You could move Dominic Puni to left guard because he played there in college. He was primarily a tackle, but he played a little bit of left guard. You put Mekhi Becton at right guard. That's how you bulk up your offensive line right there. You either sign or draft a center, and then you're looking at an offensive line where you're improved at left guard, Puni over Banks. You find a center, you're improved there over Brendel. Not hard to improve because he was the worst center in the NFL. You get Becton at right guard. Maybe you still survive with Colton McKivitz at right tackle from a financial standpoint, but these are creative ways to rebuild your football team in a logical sense, in a realistic sense, that is the thought process that has to be what the Niners are thinking of right now.
Yeah, no, I love what I've seen from Becton at right guard, and when you have Lane Johnson at right tackle and Mekhi Becton at right guard, and you have Mailata back, and they just have a big physical mauling defense or offensive line.
And Cam Jurgens was a Pro Bowler, and he replaced Kelsey.
Right.
So I was talking to Grant the other day, and he's like, the Eagles have done a really good job of letting players go and replacing them. You let Javon Hargrave go. You take Jalen Carter, Pro Bowler, All-Pro caliber player this year. Jason Kelsey retires. You replace him with Cam Jurgens. Fletcher Cox retires. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis step in. You let Hassan Reddick go. Nolan Smith has 7.5 sacks this year. And so the Niners, on the other hand, have whiffed in free agency. They haven't replaced players. Larry, they traded DeForest Buckner after 2019. They haven't gotten defensive tackle right since then. And so this is what happens when you fail in the draft and in free agency. You come to a situation like the Niners are in this year where they have an obvious lack of talent and lack of depth, and injuries doesn't help that either.
No, you're absolutely right. All right, it is time for our Better lineup. Use Better to make daily fantasy lineups and win real money. Download the app below. Make sure you use the promo code Niners to get your first deposit matched up to $200. Everyone who does automatically is entered into the drawing to win the free signed Ricky Pearsall jersey, which we'll give away on Super Bowl Sunday in our postgame show. All right, let's take a look at some better lineups for this week in the playoffs. Is there a game that you like, some of the matchups, Chase, that you want to pick on? Why don't we go Eagles, since you cover the Eagles? Let's go Eagles Packers. See if we can make some money on something we know.
Yeah.
Any of the Eagles or Packers that you want to check out some of the categories? You got a bunch of different options here for both teams.
Yeah.
Why don't we go Zach Bond? I mean, we were just talking about Zach Bond.
Yeah, Zach Bond.
5.5 solo tackles or Solo, or is it 5.5 just solo tackles? Maybe that's too many. Maybe that's too. Maybe that.
Yeah, that's a lot for Solo. I mean,
That's a lot for
he's
Solo.
very active with solo tackles. He had well over 100 this year. What's Jalen Carter at right there?
Let's see.
What can we
He's
do
got
for
two
him? Two
different
projections.
Let's see. We got 1.5 solo tackles or just a sack.
I like a sack.
Okay, let's go sack. Let's go sack there for Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter's been so much better in year 2 than year 1 too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, what he's been able to do this year. How about Saquon? Let's take a look at Saquon. He's got 9 categories there. 101.5 rushing yards, 11.5 receiving yards. You can get the 118.5 rushing and receiving combo, 20.5 longest run, 8.5 longest catch.
I like 20.5 longest run.
Do you? Okay, you like
the
21. Okay, let's go there. We'll take longest run, and we got to take somebody from Green Bay in that one as well. So let's get one more from that game. Let's see if we can take a look at Green Bay. I kind of think Jaden Reed. Let me see Jaden Reed, because you have no Watson. Jaden Reed's kind of the money receiver.
Yeah, no doubt.
So what are his receiving? I like him over 42 receiving yards. I don't think it's going to be a monster day, but that's not a big number. 42 receiving yards. Jaden Reed is he's the guy that shows up at the money on the table. So let's go over 41.5 receiving yards for Jaden Reed. So there you go. I think let's go 3 for 3. We won't try to make it big. We'll just try to go 3 for 3. Let's see what our 3 for 3 will pay us. Okay, 3 for 3. We're going to make $90. Looks like. So is it 10 to win 90? 3 pick entry to win $90. And we have Jalen Carter's got to get a sack. Saquon Barkley's got to have a 21-yard run. And Jaden Reed has got to have at least 42 yards receiving. If it happens, we go 9 to 1 on our $10 bet, and we're going to win $90. So there you go. Thanks to Better for being this live stream is sponsored by Better, the official daily fantasy sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Better for sponsoring the Krug Show. All right, let's get to Brock Purdy. There's an awful lot of speculation about Brock Purdy's contract. One of my takeaways from the Lynch Shanahan presser was that, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, Chase, and I'm glad that you're here today because you cover the Niners. You'd have a pretty good feel for this. Lynch came out and was like, Brock's our guy, and he's going to be our guy for a long time.
Yep.
Shanahan came out and did something that I've never heard him do, which was he praised Brock profusely, and then he said, Brock's the only quarterback that I ever want to have here in San Francisco. So they both really praised him. And my read on that is just that there has to have been some talks between the Niners and Brock's agent. There's no way they're that over the top Brock if he said, hey man, it's 70 million or don't call me. You know what I mean? Or 65 million or screw the hell off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think that's I don't know, is that a safe landing spot, or do you think I maybe misgauged that? But I just don't think they're so pro Brock if the first exchange of numbers is just like, no way. So
yeah.
I kind of viewed their pro Brock verbiage as maybe a real positive sign that the contract talks with Purdy and his agent may get done sooner. Than sooner rather than later.
Yeah, well, it was pretty effusive praise, as you said. Pretty effusive praise for Purdy, as you said. John Lynch comes out and said he's our guy, and then Kyle Shanahan, as you said, as long as I'm in San Francisco, I want him to be our quarterback. I also thought it was pretty notable how Purdy had said from his locker for his season-ending media gathering, I want to get this deal done early. Then the Niners brass, they said, we want to get this deal done early. It's effusive praise, but what else are the Niners going to say? Of course, they're going to back their quarterback because what he's done since 2022 has been very impressive. And I think that they understand, and Purdy and his camp understand, that everything went wrong this year, and that certainly impacted the numbers. Are there some red flags, and are there some concerning trends with his drop-off in play and what we saw this year? Yeah, I think so. But I think the deal with Purdy is if you put good complementary pieces around him, he can be an elite quarterback in this league. And I loved what you said the other day. You can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. Now, you're going to have to win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy with a really good complementary cast, but they almost won it. They were a few plays away from doing that in February against the Kansas City Chiefs. And so he's capable of doing that. Ultimately, what I think it comes down to, the Niners can tell us he's our guy. Kyle Shanahan can say, I want to be with him the rest of my Niners tenure. How they really feel about him, we will see with the contract that they offer him. If they offer him a contract $30 to $40 million per year, I think that's pretty telling. If they offer him a deal $50 to $60 million per season, then yeah, they really think that Brock Purdy is their guy. And I do think it's very important to get this deal done early to avoid the awkwardness, the drama, and the weird vibes that we saw from this past offseason going into training camp and in the preseason with Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams. So again, ultimately, I think it comes down to what the Niners offer will go to show what they really think of Brock Purdy.
What should that offer be? I mean, this is a difficult negotiation. You saw Chris Sims the other day with Florio. Chris Sims was like, I'd offer him 30. When it's funny too, because like Baker, he's like, Baker makes 30. Yeah, but if Baker were a free agent today off the year that he just had, he wouldn't be offered 30.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just seems that seemed really like, we're going to set a new market with Brock. It's like, it's hard to win paying your quarterback $50 million. So even though Tua makes 50, he shouldn't. And even though, Lawrence makes 50, he shouldn't. And even though Goff makes 50, it's like, okay. So, I mean, is that your stance? I mean, it seems like some people's stance is like, you can't win if you pay your quarterback $50 million, but you cover the Eagles. I think if there is any quarterback that I would feel comfortable saying Brock's that guy, I think he's the most like Jalen Hurts. And why do I say that? Just because I think Jalen Hurts is good enough to win a Super Bowl with, but I also don't think Jalen Hurts can win a Super Bowl by himself.
Yeah.
I think Brock Purdy's good enough to win a Super Bowl with, but I'm pretty convinced he can't win it by himself. I think both those guys have to have a lot of the same elements: good line, good weapons, good defense. But if they do, I think Hurts could win multiple, and I think Purdy could win multiple. So I kind of see Purdy as Hurts, and the Eagles are paying Hurts $55 million or whatever, and they've got a pretty damn good roster. So
yeah,
what would you say to people that say, oh, you can't pay Purdy 50 because you won't be able to have a championship roster around him?
It's pretty incredible how toxic this conversation has gotten, because even if I were to come out, and I've said this, and say, I don't know if Brock Purdy is worth that $50 to $60 million per year number. And you can talk about the market being the market, but why should the Niners fall into the trap that the Jags did in paying Trevor Lawrence, the trap that the Dolphins fell into in paying Tua Tagovailoa? Because I think Brock Purdy is better than those quarterbacks, yet I think both of those teams regret paying those quarterbacks that much money. And so just because the market is what it is doesn't mean the Niners also have to follow suit and follow the market, because I think at some point teams are going to be like, well, hold on. We can't just pay all of these quarterbacks this amount of money. The New York Giants paid Daniel Jones $40 million. He's not even on the team any longer. He's with the Minnesota Vikings. And another thing that amazes me is how I'll say, I don't know if I want to pay Purdy to $50 to $60 million. Chase, you're a Purdy hater. I've been one of his biggest supporters since he was a rookie. You and I were two of the earliest people talking about the Niners who were saying, you can't cut Purdy. If you cut Purdy, he's going to latch on with another team, given what he did in the preseason. I like what he's bringing to the table. I like the game when he took over in 2022. Last year, when he was top 5 in MVP voting, I was calling him elite, one of the top quarterbacks in the game. I was pointing out his strengths. You as well, because you have a good evaluation eye. But if the Niners don't pay him 50 to 60, people don't realize it's not disrespectful to Purdy. That's not the angle that I'm coming from. It's actually better for the team. because the Dallas Cowboys have paid Dak 50 to 60. Now they're paying him 60, and the rest of the roster is watered down. And so my concern with paying Purdy is that he needs complementary pieces around him, like Jalen Hurts. But if you pay him that much money, are you going to be able to build up a team around him that's going to be able to maximize him? Because I don't know if he's going to be able to lift up others. The Eagles are able to do it because Howie Roseman is a genius with the cap. A lot of other teams aren't geniuses with being able to pull off these financial gymnastics. Now, the Niners do get creative on the cap. They're one of the best organizations at doing that. But the concern with paying him that much money, does the rest of the roster get watered down because you're giving him that much money? And so what I would love is 40 to 50 million, because that average annual value, I think, is more along the lines of what Purdy is worth, yet the market is 50 to 60. But if you pay him 40 to 50, it allows you to have a really good roster around him, which is what I think the Niners need. So I don't think he's going to take a hometown discount. I had reported that his camp is going to settle for that. And I think the Niners are going to pay him 50 to 60. I just worry what the rest of the team is going to look like if that is the figure.
Who do you think runs the negotiation, Brock or the agent? Do you think the agent is out to make a name for himself because Brock is his only high-profile client, or do you think the agent is trying to do the best by Brock? And when I say that, I mean, well, Brock making the most money is obviously a good thing for Brock, but I don't know that I would agree with that, because in reality, Brock Purdy at his core is insanely competitive and is not going to be happy with Dak Prescott money on a losing situation. He's going to want to win. So to me, it seems like if you really are all about winning, and I think Brock is, don't you want to make sure that the contract is structured so it enables you to win? So I think that it's not just about the most, it's about the right figure that pays you handsomely, but also enables you to win. It's kind of tricky, isn't it? Because it's not like, hey, are you the winner if you make 62 million? Well, yeah, you're setting the new standard. The Players Association would say you're a winner, but are you a winner if that number prevents your team from ever playing in another Super Bowl again? Probably not, because then the fans are eventually going to come for you, and the media, and the pressure of the whole thing of not winning is going to all fall on your head. So to me, it's like, this is where it takes like a lot of maturity as a prospect. It's not just get me the most. It's like, get me a lot and get me a chance where I can win a championship. Because if you don't have both, what do you got?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. Brock Purdy is the most notable client for Kyle Strongton, who is a good dude. Like, I've talked to him many times, and I think that he's going to want to make a statement in this contract negotiation to back his client, because his client is his most notable client. That'll help him for the rest of his career if he's able to win this negotiation. But I think part of the process for him and Purdy's been the best bargain deal in the NFL throughout the course of his rookie contract. He will make $1 million this year, the final year of his deal. He's played for under $1 million the previous three. And at the level that he's played, it's not even close. He's been the best bargain contract in the National Football League. And so I think they're going to try to make up for what Purdy has not made financially with this new contract. I also think there's a part of Purdy too, where he wants to get this deal done. He understands that he's a little bit limited as a quarterback. And if it gets to a point where the Niners are pretty steadfast in their offer, and it's a number that Purdy and his agent and his camp like, I think that they can come to an agreement on that deal without things getting too hostile. I don't think that you're going to see Purdy taking to social media like Deebo Samuel did and Brandon Ayuk did to make these things messy, because Purdy even said it himself. I don't like this drama. And so I think that's how you got to look at this contract negotiation between Purdy and San Francisco. And I think the Niners even know, look, he has severely outplayed what we have paid him, and we do kind of owe it to him for what he's done with our team to give him a contract that is close to or around market value. And the numbers also don't lie. Statistically, he's been one of the top performing quarterbacks in the league. It also helps Purdy, Larry, that this quarterback draft class absolutely stinks. And there aren't free agent alternatives who you can sign in free agency who are going to be better than Purdy. He's so much better than all of the QBs in the draft and who are among this free agent class.
It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. But the first indication of at the presser is that if he had asked for crazy money, I think they would have been more cagey in how they described him. I got to think after watching that presser that they'll be able to get something done. Two last quick thoughts on the quarterback thing. Give me the number AAV that you would shoot for if you were the Niners. Give me the number that you think the AAV will ultimately be.
Yeah, if I'm the Niners, I think realistically, even though the number scares me a little bit of going in that $50 to $60 million per year range, I want to start these contract negotiations off on the right foot. I'd offer 50 right from the bat. And that's what I would offer him right from the get-go, is 50 per year. And then I'd see where Purdy wants to go from there.
Invader 49ers says AAV means nothing. No, obviously the guaranteed money is the big thing, but there's lots of different ways to structure those guarantees.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see what neighborhood, because we're talking about, some people are like, offer him 30. Other people are like, no, he's going to get 60. So, man, that's a huge disparity there.
You know who cares about AAV? Players, because it's bragging rights.
Right.
Yeah.
Who's in your ideal 2025 49er quarterback room?
So I put together my perfect Niners offseason plan, and I went through all of the moves that I think the Niners needed to or need to make to get back into playoff contention. They need to rebuild the offensive line. They need to get better along the defensive line. They needed to fire Nick Sorensen. They needed to fire Brian Schneider. They needed to bring in an offensive coordinator. I would have liked to have seen a fresh set of eyes. Shanahan elevated Kubiak. It is what it is, but hopefully that can help Shanahan a little bit after he had a little bit of a vanilla season in which he struggled. And then as part of that perfect offseason plan, among 15 other steps that I put together, I think the Niners should sign Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson is a young player who has upside, arm talent, mobility. And I think he's a player who had an opportunity to get a fresh set of eyes on him, and he was able to get a deep breath and a refresher of a season alongside Sean Payton. Prior to the year, Sean Payton was very complimentary of Zach Wilson. And so that was the first step toward rehabilitating his confidence, his game, and his mechanics. And then the next step of that is going to the Niners. And if you're San Francisco, you can go to Zach Wilson and say, we'll give you some decent coin. Brock Purdy suffered some injuries. We still have a playoff Super Bowl roster. We're going to come back in 2025 motivated. We have the easiest strength of schedule among 32 teams in the NFL. Look at what Sam Darnold was able to do in 2024 with Minnesota. He completely changed the narrative around him, and now he's going to get a fat deal, and he had an opportunity to be with us under Kyle Shanahan, with Brian Griese if he stays and doesn't get the Jets head coaching job. He's going to interview, or at least the Jets requested to interview him. You can make some decent money, as I had said, and this is a year where you can continue your development. And he's such a more high upside player as compared to Brandon Allen, as compared to Joshua Dobbs, with the arm strength, with the mobility, with the age. And I think there's a player in there. Look at what Sam Darnold did this year. Look at what Baker Mayfield has done. Look at what Bryce Young has been able to do this year under Dave Canales, where he has played better the back half of the year than CJ Stroud. And if you said that this time last year, people would say you were absolutely nuts. That's what good coaching can do. We can't give up on these quarterbacks so early. And I don't want a player like Mac Jones. He's too physically limited for me as far as mobility, arm strength. I want a player like Zach Wilson because I think there's something there to mold. And he's gone from the Jets to now Sean Payton. I like the Sean Payton influence. You get him with Kyle Shanahan. You put him under Brock Purdy. He has mobility, athleticism, strong arm. He can make plays happen with his legs. And I saw some moments with the Jets where I was like, all right, he can spin it. But from the jump, I didn't like him going from BYU, Mormon country, to New York City. That's a huge cultural jump coming from a small town where he grew up. In San Francisco, I think you and Grant are the only people who ask tough questions toward the media. It is not a media market like New York, Philadelphia, or Boston. And I think that would help and bode well for Zach Wilson living in Santa Clara away from San Francisco.
I love it. So it would be Brock, Zach Wilson, Tanner Mordecai?
Yeah, Tanner Mordecai, or like, do you take a Riley Leonard in the late rounds?
I kind of like Riley Leonard.
A player like
watching
that.
His magic.
Yeah,
he looked good to me.
I like his mobility. I like his leadership. I don't know about the physical tools throwing. He threw for under 100 yards against Georgia. Didn't really do anything on Thursday night against Penn State, but he did make some clutch plays. And so that's a player who I like from a leadership standpoint, who you can develop over time, who might be physically limited, like Brock, but can he make up for it in other areas? Maybe.
That's a good one. I like Riley Leonard, but man, the lack of arm strength. It's somebody compared him today. Oh, I think it might have been Cowherd.
He's like, Cowherd, I see some Josh Allen. No,
Josh Allen.
No,
it's like, dude, Josh Allen, if his arm got broken.
Yeah.
I mean, Josh Allen, if he had no arm strength,
he's only like Josh Allen with his height and running ability. Arm strength, it's not even close. It's like comparing me as a basketball player to Shaquille O'Neal.
Right. My fastball to Nolan Ryan's fastball.
Exactly.
Nolan Ryan's fastball is better. I would say this. If it was up to me, my quarterback room, I'm going Brock Purdy. I like your idea of Zach Wilson and Tanner Mordecai. But I'll tell you the one, and I don't think you could make this happen because I don't think Philly would make the trade. But I like Tanner McKee.
He's really good.
I like Tanner McKee.
I liked
Tanner McKee at Stanford. I used to do the Stanford pre and post game show. So I've seen myself way more Tanner McKee than most people. And he's kind of weird in that he had like skin cancer as a kid. So he like never wears short sleeves. He's always like fully sleeved up. And he's like, he never shows any skin. He might even wear a glove. But as far as the guy throws lasers, he's accurate. He kind of reminds me of a little bit more physically substantial version of Nick Foles.
Yes, he does.
He's angular, tall, but he throws lasers and he's accurate.
Yeah.
And he's smart. And he's a little under the radar athletically. I loved what I saw from him. I think he's better than Pickett. I mean, I don't think you could get Roseman to trade him to you, but man, I might consider offering them like a 5th round pick and see if they would trade you Tanner McKee. I think Tanner McKee is an NFL starting quarterback. I really do.
I agree. And I was saying this last year when he was a rookie in the preseason in 2023, the Eagles drafted him out of Stanford. And I'm like, 6'5", 240. The biggest thing that stands out to me about him at that time in the preseason this year, and when he started in week 18 against the Giants, he throws with such great timing, accuracy, and anticipation toward the sideline.
Yeah.
The back
he
shoulder
can
ball,
zip it to you. He can shoot it out there in a window that's so tight that you would never believe it.
Yeah, and he came in for Kenny Pickett against the Cowboys in week 17. He threw this back shoulder ball to A.J. Brown that was phenomenal. I mean, just a beautiful throw. And then he gets the start against the Giants. He's playing with backups against the Giant starters. Now, keep in mind, Giants are one of the worst teams in the NFL. He was slinging it. They had him throw 41 times. And so he's a diamond in the rough that the Eagles know what they have. Yeah. Now people are starting to catch on. I think he's better than Kenny Pickett. I think they want him to be the backup. But I think that he's going to have an opportunity to be a starter in this league. And I think the Nick Foles comps are pretty good. Nick Foles was very
a little bit better arm than Nick Foles.
Yeah, better arm than Foles, more athletic than Foles slightly. But Foles had really slow feet. McKee has better feet, better arm, throws with more timing, touch accuracy, and anticipation, and gets rid of the ball really quickly, makes really quick decisions. So I don't think the Eagles, for all that being said, would trade him away to a conference rival in the Niners. But if I'm the Niners, that's a player who I'm looking at, and I'm saying I think that he could be a starter in this league.
Yeah, you wait and 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 you see if he shakes free at some point. But he looks legit. All right, couple last ones. Your takeaway from the Lynch Shanahan presser. There was so much action in that presser, so many announcements, so many different things that were interesting. What stood out to you?
Yeah, so the effusive praise of Brock Purdy was pretty notable to me. Them saying definitively, he is our guy. Kyle Shanahan, as we know, can be very stubborn, but he's at least willing to look at other defensive systems and acknowledge that if we do run it back with our same defensive scheme, we have to adapt, we have to evolve, we have to make some adjustments. I think that was part of the Nick Sorensen downfall, in addition to him not being creative, exotic, and just all of the sloppy play that you saw on that back end. Him elevating Kubiak to offensive coordinator. He let him call plays in week 18. So I think Shanahan understands we could use a fresh set of eyes on this offense. I give Shanahan credit for acting quickly, moving off of Nick Sorensen, moving off of Brian Schneider. Those are two moves that had to take place with this coaching staff. And I think it injects confidence and belief back in this football team. And I just think some changes were needed for this team to just get the vibes going in a different direction. I thought it was interesting how John Lynch really defended Kyle Shanahan when talking about the narrative that Shanahan doesn't care about special teams. He's like, look, I watch Kyle, and that narrative out there that he doesn't care about that phase of the game, it's extremely false. We've used draft picks on special teamers. We've used financial capital on special teamers. It just comes down to them being better, and they have to get better a little bit personnel-wise. So those were a few of the takeaways. The writing was on the wall for Javon Hargrave to be a post-June 1 designation. They're admitting their fault there. Hopefully they do the same with Jake Moody. But yeah, now it's time to act on that. Like, they have to get better at defensive tackle, have to get better at edge, have to bulk up the offensive line. And I just think that Shanahan looked a little bit more refreshed. He looked a little bit less fatigued. I think that he's excited to have a full off season, because I think earlier this year he was worn down. You saw that in his face, but I think that's a good sign for him and this team moving forward to 2025, where they can get back at it. And I think that the strength of schedule, it being dead last in the NFL, also has the Niners believing that if we hit on the draft again, we make some free agency moves, we get healthy, we can get back to contending for a Super Bowl. I disagree with them wanting to keep Deebo Samuel. That's a player who I would move off of, but they love him, and I think they love him to a fault, because I think his best days are behind him.
I do too. I did get the sense that, they're not going to cut Deebo, but I get the sense that if somebody comes knocking, that, in a draft weekend trade, I think he's available. I think he's available, and I think he moves.
Yeah.
I think I could see him going to Miami. Who knows exactly where he'd go, but that to me seems like a spot for him for sure.
Especially if Miami moves off Tyreek Hill.
Quick thought. Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
Hugh Jassel says if the Niners got a badass defensive tackle, it would make a huge difference.
For sure.
Is there, we're gonna have lots of time between now and April to talk draft. I just watched Penn State last night against Notre Dame. Notre Dame's got some incredible players. Penn State's got some incredible players. That running back Singleton is a tremendous back. It's funny how many Niner fans sent me notes last night. Abdul Carter.
He might go number 1.
It's like, dude, did you just discover this player today? I mean, this guy has been badass all year. I mean, you're out there in PA. Our PA country. You're not.
This is his first year too, Larry. By the way, playing edge rusher.
And in the Niners system, they like 270-pound edge rushers. So this guy's probably more of a stacked backer.
230.
230. I don't know. I mean, that's probably a little on the light side, to be completely honest, for what the Niners are looking for. But is there a player that you've seen either last night in that game, or that you're looking for tonight in Texas, Ohio State, or in this bowl season, or in this college playoff? Is there any player that you're at this point, late, early January, you're fired up about in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, so a month ago, I was saying I would love Abdul Carter to the Niners. We didn't know when the Niners would be drafting. I think he's played himself out of being in the range for San Francisco. He could go number one. He's going to be a top 5 guy. So unfortunately, that's not going to happen any longer. He was all over the field last night. It was an incredible game for Carter with an injured shoulder. And he was lined up on the left side of the line of scrimmage when usually he's on the right side. And he was just incredible. Mason Graham is a dream target, but I think Abdul Carter and Mason Graham, who's the defensive tackle for Michigan, are the top 2 players in this draft class because the quarterback class is so light. So I like those 2 players a lot. Probably not going to fall to San Francisco. Kelvin Banks is the offensive tackle for Texas, who's been a little bit banged up of late, but there's some scheme familiarity there. I think that he's a really good player. Will Campbell at a LSU is probably the first or second graded offensive tackle on my board going into this class. He's obviously not playing in the CFP, but he's really good. I like both of the Penn State backs. I think the Niners have to draft the back. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton are really good players. I've been talking about this for about a month. But if the Niners go best player available, you know who might be the best player available at number 11? Tyler Warren.
Starks.
Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren might be the best player available. Now, that would be a luxury pick, and it's not in the trenches. That goes away from what I think the Niners need to do and how I value team-building strategy. But if you want to move off of George Kittle after 2025, the expiring year of his deal, and you want to replace him with the ideal replacement, Warren's a freak. And you could go 2 tight end sets next year that could help out your offensive personnel. But I just think you have to go trenches. Offensive line, defensive line. Who's that Ole Miss defensive tackle who you brought up to me a couple weeks ago? Walter Nolan. He's probably more of like a mid to late first-round pick, maybe a second-round guy. Again, a lot of it depends on the pre-draft scouting combine, but that's another player who the Niners could really like too.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not love Tyler Warren after watching him last night? He looked absolutely phenomenal. And there's, Notre Dame's got some great players too. Notre Dame had a bunch of guys that weren't playing. I'll tell you, the game tonight, there's a linebacker for Texas. Now, he's not a first, second, or third round guy. He's more of a mid-round guy. His name's David Benga, and it's spelled Gbenga. He's from his parents came from Sierra Leone. He's just an incredible athlete. I kind of like him as a mid-round linebacker, but Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, the 2 Georgia Michigan defensive tackles, are just so monster. And I think they do need to upgrade defensive tackle. But as I've watched more and more, I'm in love with the 2 Nebraska interior guys. They have a guy named Ty Robinson, and they also have another guy named Nash Hutmacher. And Hutmacher's like 320 pounds. They're both huge guys. Hutmacher's like an all-state Nebraska wrestler who's just a ridiculous, never lost. I mean, he's just incredible. I like those guys as more late round defensive tackles. So I guess I'd go away from Nolan and Graham, and I think I'd go for, I love this Harold Fannin Jr., the Bowling Green tight end, who's just was amazing in the bowl game. I love Jelon Walker, the Butkus Award winner from Georgia, who's a rusher for Georgia. He's kind of a Devin White type guy. They use him as an edge rusher, but he's really a stack backer in the NFL. I love Benjamin Morrison, the corner from Notre Dame. I think he's great. Tyler Booker, the guard from Bama. I think he's monster. So those are the guys that stand out. I guess right now, if it was me, if I was staying at 11, based on the fact that I like Robinson and Hutmacher later, Malachi Starks seems like a plug and play all pro free safety to me.
Yeah. Michael Williams is really good too.
Yeah, Mikel Williams is really good. But Malachi Starks, to me, I think I might start there if I was at 11. But I think the plan for me would be trade back a couple times and get into the 20s and then get some more picks. Yeah. That's the route I would go for the Niners. I think they need their version of the 1986 draft. That being said, let's get out of here by picking the games this weekend. Who do you like? Chargers, Texans, and we'll go right down the list. I'm going Chargers to beat the Texans Saturday in the first playoff game Who do you have in that game?
I like the Chargers as well. The Texans are just cold at the wrong time.
I like this. I like the Ravens, and I like the Ravens to cover that number against the Steelers. I know the Steelers play the Ravens tough, but this Ravens team just seems ready for takeoff, and Pittsburgh looks bad to me.
Yeah, Zay Flowers isn't going to play, so that's a big loss for Baltimore. But again, the Ravens are hot. The Steelers have been bad for a month now, so I like Baltimore to cover too.
How about Buffalo, Denver? I know Buffalo's going to win. I'm just kind of wondering about that 9.
I like Denver to cover. I think it's going to be close and hairy. I think Buffalo's on a little bit of an upset alert just because they've lacked playoff success. I do think the Bills ultimately win, though.
I love the Eagles to beat the Packers. I just think that the Packers can't. The Packers are good, but they can't beat Detroit. They can't beat Minnesota. They can't beat Philly. They'll be rocking in Philly. I think Philly's played probably the best football of anybody in the last second half of the year. I mean, they've won games with backup quarterbacks. We've already outlined that.
Yeah.
Their O-line's taken over. Their defense is number one. I like Philly to win and cover that 5.5.
Yeah, I like the Eagles as well. Jalen Hurts just clear concussion protocol on this Friday morning. I think they match up well with Green Bay, and Green Bay hasn't really played that well over the last month either.
The game I don't know about is this next one, Commanders Bucks. I could see it going either way. I'll take the Commanders, but I'm not wagering on this game. And if you told me the Bucks won that game by 10, I wouldn't be surprised.
I like Tampa Bay. I'm going to go with the veteran quarterback. I'm going to go with the home team against the rookie quarterback, an inexperienced team. And I think Tampa Bay is a sneaky team that if they're playing in the NFC Championship game, I won't be surprised.
Yeah, they're really a tough team to play. And then Vikings-Rams. Give me the Vikings, especially now that the game's in Arizona because of the wildfires down in Southern Cal. I'll take I like Minnesota to win this game anyway, but I really like them now.
Rams beat them earlier this year. I think Minnesota gets back at them now. I don't think Minnesota winning 14 games and then losing against Detroit week 18 and in the first round. It can't happen. It can't happen.
Awesome, man. Have a great rest of your Friday. What do you got cooking? Are you putting out videos on the channel? What's your Friday looking like?
Yeah, plenty of videos and content to come all throughout the weekend. I know people don't like the fact that I cover the Eagles, but a lot of Eagles content. Eagles watch party on Sunday as well. I'm not a huge birthday guy, but today's my birthday, so I'm trying to eat some steaks, have some good food, and then watch the game tonight. So
look at you, dude. So my birthday is 2 days from now.
We're both Capricorns. If
we're
you're
Capricorns,
into that
you're January 10th. I'm January 12th. You know who you share a birthday with? I believe today might be was Willie Mays' birthday or maybe Willie McCovey, one of the great Giants. But January 10th. Okay, January 10th. For me, it's 55. For you, you're younger. How old are you?
33 today. So
33.
Me, you, Colin Cowherd, all this week, all in the sports broadcasting space. Let's go.
Don't forget Howard Stern. Howard Stern, and I believe the late Rush Limbaugh also January 12th.
Look at that.
Amazing. All right, that's going to do it for us. Happy birthday, Chase, and have a great rest of your day. And thanks to all you guys for jumping in. Have a great rest of your weekend. Go Niners. Enjoy the football this weekend.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared.